Hello, this is Dale Matthews, and welcome to Inside News. I'm joined today by Mike Jones and Nate Gaoiran. Nate Gaoiran is the Community Corrections Director for Josephine County. Hello, Mike, and hello, Nate.
Good evening, Dale. And Nate. Howdy.
Right. So, the first thing that we're going to do on the show, as we've been doing every night for several nights here, is we're going to play back an excerpt from a speech that one of the candidates for county commissioner, made this last Tuesday at the Black Bear, which was a GOP invitational to all candidates. And tonight it's the turn of Mark Seligman. Mark?
We don't mind if I stand up. No problem. Good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Seligman. For those of you that don't know me, I want to thank the Republicans and everybody in this room for having this event tonight. It's really important to inform the voters on how each candidate stands on every single important issue. Now, there's every single candidate in this room has contributed something positively during their tenure or in their experience as a citizen. Some more than others. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I was born in New York City in 1949. I was raised in a really good home. My father instilled certain values in, he said, Mark, when you see something wrong, speak up. People may not like what you're saying, but you should still say it. The truth will set you free. Never lie to me. Don't, I'd never lied to him. I didn't tell him everything, but I didn't lie to him if he asked me something, okay? Some things he didn't need to know. But, the values that my mother died when I was 1.5, and my dad pretty much raised me till a stepmother came along. But he instilled values in me. He was my hero. He took me to the Little League, all of this stuff. I got really involved in sports growing up. Now I play golf rather poorly, but I play tennis and hockey. And I know what a kid living in New York City, you're exposed to lots of things. And you need sports. It's a good outlet for kids. The more that we can have in this community, the better. Because the youth, that's our future, How many here in this room are under 40 years old? Maybe Vic, you might be the only one. So, I'm a very compassionate person. For me, the important issues in this county are poverty, crime, and homelessness. We are the ninth worst county in economy in the United States. Poverty goes up in those places. Crime goes up in those places. We have to get this under control. Now, in fact, last night I saw Brad Converse out in Cave Junction talking about tiny homes. This is something it can be done in Grants Pass, and we're trying to get it done in Cave Junction. There's several issues that are very important to me. One of them is property tax levies, whether it be HB 3453, which we've talked about, or whether it be the state coming in and doing $2 a thousand. By the way, this can only happen if the state votes it and if the county commissioners declare a state of emergency. I would never declare a state of emergency. So what kind of solutions do we have? Well, as a county commissioner, I would regulate as little as I have to. There's some regulations that are necessary, but we have to encourage business here and not put, hindrances upon them. The role of government. Well, people say, well, why do you want to get in government if you're such a county critic? Because I feel that government can do too much. It has overstepped its role on a national level, and it's overstepping its role on a local level. I think the city has really overstepped its role. Grants Pass City Council is responsible for the economy of Grants Pass being less than it could by some of its regulations. Now, I went to college in New York City. I have a BA in sociology, so I know about people and what goes, the values and mores in society. I have a 2-year degree from Queensborough Community College in New York in business administration. I've run a business for 35 to 40 years, landscape maintenance. I've done it in California and I've done it here. There's a lot of people in this county that want to work, and there's not enough work for them. That's just the reality. The 9th worst economy in the United States. Now, I differ. I'm going to mention this not as criticism, but as differences. There's a couple of candidates running right now. By the way, I agree with what Paul said. We have two candidates. One is Mr. DeYoung and one is Lily Morgan. They're running for opposite spots, but they're from the city. The city council has never met a tax it didn't want except for the sales. Well, Lily Morgan is the only one, and I'm going to give her credit. She was against that sales tax. She also was the architect of the $1 million to pay for jail beds. That was a good thing. So she has done some good things. But there's some differences here, some really clear differences. Lily Morgan is a government employee. She is an insider. I am clearly an outsider. And I have some issues with her. One of the issues will take the position of property tax levies and city tax levies. And this is what I fear when you have candidates like this running for office. She's always supported every single tax levy that I have known since I've been in this county. And I fear that although she may talk a little bit and say, well, we'll have to see how the voters are, you run on your record. I run on my record as a county critic and what I stand for. Now, people say, well, what are you going to do to improve the economy of Grants Pass and the local regions? Well, I'm for timber. I'm for encouraging business. I am a supporter of the cannabis industry. And this is what the city of Grants Pass has banned it, and they've hurt industry. Lily Morgan has a real interesting position on this. She's quoted in the paper as saying, we cannot have this, the smell, and it's against land use. And then when the vote came up, she wasn't there. She didn't vote. And then when Tamara Dean tried to get her dispensary in, she voted against land use. Now I see her at the THC fair in Medford. Well, that's really good. But you see, again, you run on your record. People know my record on taxes. I'm against it. They know increased taxes. They know my record on cannabis. I'm a big supporter. And this is Lily Morgan's record. Okay? You run on your record. If you change your mind while you're in term, fine. But if you change your mind merely to Curry County voters, that's suspicious. I don't believe in that. But like I say, she was against the sales tax, and I commend her for that. Now, you're getting pretty close. Okay, I'll sum this up. The bottom line is this. We live in a very beautiful county. If our youth cannot stay here because there are no jobs and they have to move away, or they have to go to the soup kitchen, or they have to be on food stamps, is that what we want? Do we want our grandkids to remain here? We need a prosperous county. And as your county commissioner, I will do everything I can to see the jobs come into this county. However, because if that doesn't happen, we're going nowhere.
Okay, so Mike, on to the next subject. And Nate.
Well, you know what? I know we don't comment on these things, but I do want to say one thing is that Viken is getting off easy on the age thing. Everybody thinks he's like 35. The guy's 50 something, so he's getting a free ride there. Good for him.
So Nate is the Community Corrections Director, and he made a report to the county commissioners at the all-important Thursday meeting the other day, and he said some things to them about the end of Title III funds, whatever that means, and they had a reaction to this that was a little different than I thought they were going to have, and a little different than Mr. Gaoiran thought they were going to have. So he's going to give us the report, and we may say some of the same things. We may say something slightly different. Nate, please go ahead and make your presentation and tell us, what are Title III funds again?
Okay, thanks, Dale, for that intro. So upon the request of is this badcounty.com? Is that
it is
being aired on?
Yeah. Well, this is inside news. This is inside news, and inside news is our nightly show on every night of the year that runs that you can find it on badcounty.com, and we also post it and Facebook and other places.
Oh boy, okay. Well, I'll try to I'll try to shed some light on this Title III funding. Although I'm not an expert in it, I just know what the impacts are on community corrections as it pertains to Josephine County for the upcoming fiscal year and also the biennium. So Title III funding we have received from 2013 to 2015, the last biennium I'm going to speak to, and at the tune of $470,000. Now there are some restrictions with that money, and we have allocated in the past services through our work crew program for county parks, county forestry, and also the national forest as well.
Nate,
So,
Nate,
yes.
from where does the money come? From the federal government, from the state government,
yes.
from our pockets?
These are right, federal monies. They don't come from Josephine County. So this is all Title III funding. It's like it's pass through money through the county that we can use on our work crews, specifically for county parks that are adjacent to national forest lands, county forestry projects, and the Siskiyou National Forest is what we use these for, specifically for the trail systems and all.
And when you say work crews, can you be a little more specific? What work crews?
Yeah, so Community Corrections operates work crews out of our agency for various different services, and that can be maintenance, it can be debris cleanup, it can be litter patrol, it can be help for landscaping and things of that nature, but it's operated by offenders that are within our community. They're folks that have either been released from prison or released from jail, serving local time here in Josephine County, and they go out on our work crews and perform a various number of different services, but it's all supervised by our work crew foreman and our staff, and we also get the contracts for those specific services throughout the county. So Title III funding helps with that program called the work crew. We also lump that into community service, and also home detention falls within that division. But I need to be clear that these Title III monies can only be spent on what they are intended for, and that is for land that is adjacent to the national forest, and like I said before, that county parks and county forestry and the national forest fall within those parameters. So we use that money to help fund those different programs that we have. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay, so in the biennium of 20, I answered your question, right?
Yeah, you did. Where the money comes from, what it's being used for, and who's doing the work. These people who have been in jail, they are offenders and etc. They're out on, they're being supervised. They don't get paid anything, but they get a chance to work off part of their debt to society.
That's correct. Yeah, we have what's called a supervisory authority. And what that means is basically we can have folks that are sentenced to the legal and physical custody of the supervisory authority serve a number of different ways their sentence. So say, for example, the courts sentence somebody to 10 days at the legal and physical custody of the supervisory authority. They can spend a couple of days in jail. We can do an assessment, get them released out to the community where they could serve the remainder of their sentence on our work crews. So the intent is to give back to society, also serve their time, and also contribute to some services that will help them get some skill, whether that be work ethic or being consistent with their word and their behavior. Also, they get some, elementary skills of landscaping and maintenance and litter patrol and cleanup and things of that nature. So it's really a win-win for all the parties that are involved, including the public. So,
and it sounds like some of the departments have become rather dependent on this. As one of the commissioners said, as Simon Hare said, if they didn't have the work crews, I don't know if this was a bit of hyperbole, but he said if they didn't have the work crews, the fairgrounds would shut down. Really?
So in the 2013 to 2015 biennium, we got $470,000 for Title III funding. Okay, and that's over the course of 2 years, and the biennium starts July 1st. So it's similar to the rest of the fiscal year calendar from July 1st to June 30th. Okay, so that's the biennium of 2013 and 2015. Now you fast forward to the next biennium. Okay, and you got to follow me here because it gets a little bit technical, but the 2015 to 2017 biennium, the Title III funding is getting cut in half. Now, specifically from July 1st, 2015 to June 30th, 2016, the Title III funding is $235,000. As of July 1st, 2016, there's no more Title III funding that our department is getting, okay, for community corrections. So that is what we knew going into this biennium. So we had to do some level of strategic planning to overcome that loss of revenue. Okay. Are you with me so far?
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question about, so what does the money pay for? Is it to pay for the supervision of these work crews? Is that essentially it, or?
Yeah, there's lots of different expenditures that we have. Personnel is one, equipment is another, maintenance of that equipment, storage of the equipment and supplies, fuel, oil, those kind of things, replacement costs of certain gears, and the oversight.
Yeah, it's the support
of the contracts, and so on and so forth. It's an operation that has some level of cost, and so within the work crew division, that's what we do. So some of the assets and capital that is partially funded through Title III is what I had just gone over, but specifically it'd be work crew coordinators or part-time on-call personnel, administrative management, things of that nature. And of course the equipment, we have saws and mowers and brush cutters and trailers and and the maintenance of all those things and storage. So,
right.
Now Nate,
yeah,
I think it's a pretty good rule of thumb that if your management of something and the equipment that you're using is at a certain level, that's often about half of the cost of running something, and the other half of the cost would generally be, in general, would be the payment that you do for labor. So if that's true, would I be right in saying that if you're spending $250,000 a year on management and the equipment, that the value of that service of sweeping up and doing the rest of the things that then litter patrol is approximately $250,000 a year also, except we're not paying them?
Oh, at least.
You're talking about the actual value of the service?
Right,
Yeah.
that it's about equal to the cost of managing the service.
Oh, I listen. I'll tell you something. I don't know what it is in the public sector, but the infrastructure used to support guys on a construction crew is nowhere near half of the value that you're putting out. So
That's why I said the public sector,
yeah,
Mike, which has a
yeah,
tendency to be, pardon me, but even a director, a little top heavy in
yeah,
with governments. Nate, so I don't know if you've thought of it that way, but it's a valuable
Yeah,
service.
I hadn't considered that in the presentation. But some of the direct impacts, going along with what I had talked about with the presentation, was some of the direct impacts would be to look at the termination of those agreements for providing services. And, obviously we want to have minimal impact on the jurisdiction that we have here in Josephine County. So what my plan is to backfill that loss of Title III funds with state funds. And again, it won't come from the general fund out of Josephine County. Rather, it'll come from the Community Corrections Plan Fund. And so that's what my plan is, to offset any of those impacts that would happen July 1st of 2016 with the loss of that Title III funding. But I got to tell you that, some of the indirect impacts with that reallocation of funds to backfill for the loss of Title III is, they're significant. And so that's what I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about, is the indirect impacts. Although we can have some funding reallocated for the loss, with that means that there's going to be some level of consequence. And directly for our agency here, we're constantly looking at ways to reduce recidivism. We're also looking at ways to implement programs that are evidence-based, that are meaningful, and that work. And if I reallocate state funds, or recommend, I should say, to reallocate those state funds to backfill the Title III loss, then what that means is I can't hire additional personnel, specifically another parole and probation officer or multiple parole and probation officers, to alleviate those high caseloads that we have currently for our medium and high risk offenders. I have a couple of POs just as recent as last week. When I looked at their numbers, they're in the 90s of offenders on their caseload. Now, when you carry a high risk caseload, and you have in the 90s of a caseload population, then you're really not as near as effective as you could be if you had half of that population on your caseload. So that's one of the indirect impacts that I'm going to have to deal with, as we supervise our clientele and introduce some programming that is going to have to be in response to the movement of the state funds.
Now, what this means then, Nate, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
We'll say that again.
No, you go. I'll follow you up.
What this means then, Nate, is that you have to make a judgment about what's more important: more patrol officers. No, I'm not. Probation officers, in order to be able to handle the load of 90 each, versus putting work crews out there that are going to be a benefit to various departments of the county. How do you make that cost-benefit analysis?
Well, one of the things that we're implementing right now is a thing called earned discharge, and that is a statewide mandate as a result of House Bill 3194. And what that is intended to do is have the offenders that are on supervision earn their own discharge. In other words,
Sounds
if they
unsanitary.
Say that again?
It sounds unsanitary.
Well, what happens is, if somebody is compliant over the course of their case plan while on supervision, they can effectively get half of their supervision, probation, eliminated or discharged. And so what that will do over the course of time is reduce the caseload numbers as long as they're being compliant with the case plans that are being developed by the POs. So that's one thing that we're watching, how that population is going to be affected by the implementation of earned discharge. The other things that we're doing is getting a level of service case management inventory. It's called a risk assessment tool that will discern high risk from low risk and then give us the ability to know where to put our resources. So basically, if you have a high risk person that we know by about 80% of the time will not only be arrested for a new felony, but also convicted within a 3-year period. We know that through statistical analysis and these large research projects that we've done. We can determine who is more probable to commit and be convicted of a new felony. So obviously we would want to deploy the most resources to that population. So once we get these things all ironed out and we figure out who exactly in Josephine County we need to supervise at a higher level and who we don't with the low risk population as they earn their way off of supervision, then I'll have a little bit better idea of how we're going to restructure that. And it might be in a small way, it might be in a little larger way, but that's yet to be determined at this time if we're going to restructure and supervise people differently.
If you're going to supervise somebody, you're on the telephone so that you can't see this, but we've got on our screen right now somebody that probably should be supervised. And I'd suggest that you concentrate some of your resources on this miscreant here.
Am I on the screen? Is that what's going on?
Yes, you are on the screen right now. Yes.
Yeah. You know what? I have a question. If you are planning to reorganize some of the funds and take some of the state funds that you could have used to lower your ratio on your POs and put that towards these work crews, is that the best benefit? Wouldn't you be, I mean, pardon my interjecting here because I don't know anything about the business of what you do, but wouldn't you be ahead of the game taking that state money, lowering the ratio with your POs and, let the county people do their own work, to the extent that is necessary to put you in a better zone.
We in community, I'm sorry, breaking up. Hello?
Yeah, we're still here.
Okay. If I may respond to that, we at Community Corrections recognize that it's not just state money. It's not just federal money. It's not just local money. This is a system-wide approach that we have in the supervision of folks. So for every solution, it creates its own unique challenges for anything that you're trying to manage. And there's only a finite amount of funds here. So you really got to discern what's the best move, what's the best way to allocate these funds. And so when if I were to just say, oh, I'm going to hire more POs and not backfill the loss of Title III funding for our work crew division, well, then that has other fallout. And I'll give you an example. The jail overcrowding that we have here in Josephine County, getting people out of jail to other lower levels of custody for work crew and home detention and community service, that would have an impact on our jail staff and the way the sheriff manages the jail, because then that resource wouldn't be available for him to release to the community, directly to our work crews. So if we compromise our work crews, then that has other systemic consequences. And if we hire folks for being a PO, that would alleviate some of our caseloads, but it's not fixing the overall problem of, loss of Title III funding specifically for the work crews.
Now, one of the questions that was asked of you at this briefing that you made to the commissioners is, the sheriff is an elected official, and then he generally decides how the money is going to be spent within his purview. The commissioners are elected officials. We're going to take that on here, but they're elected officials and they get to decide how money is going to be spent. You are a director of a department. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that you have the responsibility, the power to decide after the budget process, which took place, and they said, okay, here's a certain amount of money for you. We're not going to micromanage, but here's how we expect this to be used. Do you see a need and you're sailing into it, which is great? Do you have the power to say, well, we're going to take this and this and this and put them over here, and we're going to deprive a little bit these tasks that we have, and we're going to redistribute them over here? Can you do that? Can you do that without coordinating with the sheriff or the county commissioners?
Well, I'll tell you right now, Dale, that I have very little power, and that I recognize that. But I do have some of influence on recommendations to the governing authorities. And so what I typically do is I do a cost-benefit analysis. We do some strategic planning through strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, otherwise known as a SWOT analysis. And I meet with my management team in consultation with a lot of the folks that are directly involved with these different programs, and then I make an informed decision on my recommendation to the LIPSIC, the Local Public Safety Coordinating Council, as well as to our community partners up at the state level for community corrections, and specifically the Department of Corrections, and also with our county commissioners.
That's the point, Nate. Sorry to interrupt that. That's the point. What they were saying, right or wrong, what they were saying is all of those things are great, and you're making recommendations. Then the final point is, do you touch base with the commissioners, or do you, what you reported to them was that you implemented this plan? Sounds like a logical plan, but you implemented before touching second base.
Oh, the implementation, no. That's all of these things that I had just gone over. That's the planning phase, and so the actual work and the community corrections plan can't take place without the county commissioners' blessing and to sign off on it. So they're the ultimate authority over what it is that we do at community corrections.
Well, I'm going to ask you that again, Nate. You know that I like you, but what they were saying at this meeting was, it sounded like what you were saying. I was sitting right there. Sounded like what you were saying is, well, we've already done this and this and this. And one of the questions that one of the commissioners had is, what do you mean you've already done it? Go ahead.
So the community corrections plan and the agreement had been signed off by the community, by the county commissioners, and that was one of the things that we had gone through prior to the agreement with the county commissioners, is going through that process that I had explained, through LIPSIC and getting the recommendation from all the members there, and then putting that before the Board of County Commissioners.
So then the perception that happened in that room on that day was maybe a little off, that you had already coordinated with them and they just didn't recall that.
Well, I think it had more to do with the backfilling using state funds to replace the Title III funding. They were already aware of our community corrections plan. They already know that. I just don't know if they had recognized that in that meeting, or recalled that, in that meeting, with the Title III funding, because it's one line item in one of the divisions that we have here at Community Corrections. And, I have alcohol and drug division here, the work crew, supervisory authority, we got sex offender unit, domestic violence unit, field services, mental health court, drug court, and then the administrative section. And so there's a lot that goes on with community corrections, and one detail, I don't know if they even recalled that specific detail as it pertains to Title III, which was probably why I was there presenting that information.
Now let me ask. The Title III fund. I'm getting my echo thing. Have to work it out. The Title III funds that are going to be cut back, and the plan is to backfill that with state funds. Where are those state funds coming from? Were they funding something else that is now, or is in the near future, going to be shorted? And what is that?
No, those state funds come from what's called the CCA plan, or the Community Corrections Allotment Plan. And there is, it's kind of a detailed plan that I submit before the actual biennium, and then we get the funding for that from the state. So basically, from 2013 to 2015, that biennium, community corrections in Josephine County received, I think it was 2.89% of $215 million, which is the entire budget for the entire state of Oregon for community corrections. Okay, so that formula is based on the populations that we supervise out of a risk assessment tool known as the Public Safety Checklist. And if you have high-risk people based on that risk assessment tool, you get more money to supervise those folks. Okay, so that was the 2013.
If you don't mind, Nate, if you don't mind.
What's that? Is that too technical?
I guess. Yeah, it is. That's really deep into the weeds. And what I was asking, I'm not sure if you got what I was asking. What was your now Title III is being cut off, so you can't fund the work crews in the way that you were doing before. And so now you're going to backfill that with some state funds. Were those specific state funds funding something else in the county here now, which they aren't, or is that new money coming in that wasn't coming into this county before to fund anything?
That's the key question.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm getting to that answer with
Oh, okay.
my long explanation as to how you even get the state funding for community corrections. So bear with
Okay.
me. I'm almost there. So the 2013 to 2015 funding was less than the 2015 to 2017 funding. And so what that means is the state had projections of how much money it's going to cost to run community corrections statewide. And instead of Josephine County getting 2.89% of the entire allotment, we had a reduction in our percentage to 2.87%, but an increase in the total amount from 215 million statewide to 247 million statewide. So we actually ended up getting a slight bump for the 2015 to 2017 biennium. That's the money that we are using to help offset that Title III loss.
But wouldn't that money have gone to some other really important thing, and now it's not going to go to that other really important thing, Nate?
Yeah, so all of those planning details that we went over before, that all goes through the Board of County Commissioners, and prior to that, it goes through LIPSIC, the Local Public Safety Coordinating Council, and that's made up of the Chief of Police. It's made up of the District Attorney, myself, the Director of Public Health, the Sheriff, one of the County Commissioners, and folks that are really heavily invested into our local public safety. And I actually write up the reports and the recommendations for the LIPSIC to vote on after long discussions on what the needs are and where the money should go and what the plan is strategically for all of these different evidence-based programs that we have. And so once that happens, then the sign-off happens from LIPSIC, then that goes before the Board of County Commissioners for final approval of that CCA plan.
So what, to draw a bottom line to it, because we could go on, what do you believe will be the net result for the typical citizens who are keeping track of what their county government is doing for them?
We're trying to reduce the recidivism within Josephine County, and by doing that, we're really trying to make our area the best that it can possibly be, and reducing crime, reducing the poor choices that some of these offenders have made over the course of their life, to restore justice and to pay back the victims that these folks have victimized over their sometimes long criminal history. And that's our aim, and that's what our mission is. That's what we're focused on doing, and we have a finite amount of resource to do that. But I'm a realist, and I recognize that we have a mission to complete, and we're going to do our darndest to complete the mission. So.
Well, thank you for joining us, Mike. Yeah, it does. Mike, do you have any further question? This is a look into county government here, into one of the departments. Well, thank you for taking the time to explain to us Title III. And I'm not sure it's going to make a very good song, but we'll take it out.
That's true. That's true.
We appreciate you filling us in about some of this and backfilling some other things about this, Nate. And it's boy, that monitor's bouncing again, Mike. I got to fix that one of these days. And it's a good thing to look into it and to try to figure out the effects that your department has on the other departments. And we can only hope that the being shown the value of a hard day's work is going to have some effect on our local miscreants and our vagaries of the internet.
Yes, right.
Thanks, Dale. I appreciate the time.
Okay, we appreciate you joining us, and I appreciate Mike, and I'm going to assume he appreciates me, and we appreciate you as our audience. And thank you for joining us on this fascinating show about Title III. Now you know all about it. Go tell your neighbors. Good night, everybody.